Today we're looking at NHL Trade Rumours, focusing on some top-tier talent like Marc-Andre Fleury, Jack Eichel, and Matt Dumba. We also have news on the Montreal Canadiens coach Dominic Ducharme. We have a signing in Boston and a lawsuit in Chicago that looks really bad. We'll discuss all the details coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, we have a variety of news to talk about here today. First up, we have a signing with the Boston Bruins. We have the Bruins signing center iceman Trent Frederic on a 2-year contract. He gets a 2-year deal valued just a smidge over $1 million per year. It's a one-way deal both years. He gets $950,000 in year 1 and $1.15 in year number 2. So it averages out just basically like $1.05 million is the AAV. So of course Frederic likely going to be able to get a little bit bigger of a role next year. There is Sean Corelli, who's a UFA, may not be returning to the Bruins, and of course with Frederic's play throughout the year, I think it's fair to say that the Bruins are certainly satisfied with what they've seen for progress. It certainly brings a physical, tough element to their lineup that they can certainly use. So I would imagine he'll likely get a slightly expanded role over the next couple of seasons. So that's a pretty good, fair signing, I think, for the Boston Bruins. We also got word in Montreal as well that head coach Dominic Ducharme, who's currently out on the COVID protocol list, will be able to return to the Habs bench for Game 3 of the Stanley Cup Final. So based on how many days he's already been out, when the Habs return home after facing Tampa in Games 1 and 2 on the road, he'll be able to be there for Game number 3 and hopefully the rest of the way. That we don't have anything else like this take place and derail anybody else on either of these teams in the finals. We don't want COVID playing a role in either team here and how the Stanley Cup ends up getting decided and awarded. So that's certainly some welcome and pleasant news for the Habs. We're also hoping for news that Montreal will be able to increase their building capacity more than 3,500, which to me, like I said in the other video, when they first won against Vegas, like, considering how many thousands of people were packed in like sardines on the outside of the building, you may as well just let them in and let them buy a ticket, create some more revenue for the team, which is always good, and give them a safer place to watch the game. To me, I'd rather have them in the rink, in a seat, rather than all squished together like that on the outside. That's just my take on that. Considering how many people want to be a part of it, let them go inside. That's my take on it. So we'll see what happens if we get any word. The province of Quebec obviously has a little bit of time here. They've got a couple of days before it starts, and then we get games 1 and 2 in Tampa. So they really don't need to make a decision for close to a week's time on the attendance in the Bell Center. One other quick note as well, Vegas defenseman Alec Martinez apparently was playing throughout these playoffs with a broken foot. I mean, we know some of these guys are warriors and play through a lot of pain and a lot of injuries, but a broken foot is really something. And another incredible stat to go along with it, he actually leads the playoffs in block shots by a lot. He's got 20 more block shots than the next closest player to him in that statistic. So he's certainly an absolute warrior for the Golden Knights. Going to be an interesting case on the UFA market for Martinez. I think that the Golden Knights would love to keep him, but it's going to be very challenging given their extremely tight cap situation. And obviously we're going to touch on some Golden Knights potential trade talk here in the next segment anyways and see, but they're going to have some maneuvering to do on the cap if they have any chance of keeping them. I think the desire is there on both sides, but it's going to prove really difficult, and he'll certainly get a lot of looks on the open market and certainly get paid fairly well, given the fact that he's got a couple Stanley Cups from his time with the LA Kings and a lot more playoff experience now with Vegas on top of that. So, it's a good veteran guy who can still contribute and play really well, and he's durable and can play through a lot of pain, which is obviously important when it gets to playoff time. Now, before we jump into the trade talk here as well for today's video, I do want to touch on another very disturbing story, and I'm only going to touch on it quickly tonight. We will talk about this a little bit further. I just want to have more time to kind of dig through and research this whole topic more, and I'll likely do a dedicated video on it sometime here in the next few days. But there's a very disturbing lawsuit being put up against the Chicago Blackhawks by a couple of former players, as well as another former hockey player who didn't play for them but played hockey in Michigan, relating to sexual abuse allegations against a former video coach with the organizations during their 2010 Cup run. It's alleged that a couple of their players were sexually assaulted by this video coach. They did talk to some coaches about what happened. The information was escalated to management, and right now what is being accused is that management was well aware of it and did nothing about it. It was recommended that they go to police, remove the coach, obviously do something more serious about it that needed to be done, and they neglected to do that, didn't want to do that, is what things appear right now. Of course, we're still going through a court battle, and there's still lots of information that likely will come out, and we'll see what happens here, but they're certainly seeking damages, for everything they've been through. And the worst of it is that this coach ended up eventually leaving the organization not too long after this, and he was basically fired is what it sounds like, except they did things differently when it comes to like the paper trail, and he became a coach for a high school team in Michigan, which is where the other alleged victim comes into play, and he went to that to coach that team, and then ended up repeating the offense there with a minor at that. So it's bad enough it happened to anybody, but especially a minor makes it even worse. I mean, nobody should have to go through that type of stuff, but certainly it's absolutely troubling here that they gave this guy a good reference and helped him get employment elsewhere. They could have just turfed him and referred to police is what the right thing to do, but no, they helped him leave the organization quietly, not go to police, and end up going to another team, working with minors, and ended up there going and repeating the offense. Now, of course, he was later reprimanded for that and has since gone through courts and did get in legal trouble for that situation. But that player, I believe, is involved in this lawsuit as well against the Hawks, because they feel they're responsible for not stopping him and going to the police, so that this other situation could have never happened if he already had been arrested and charged. So there's a lot more details, though, within these articles. Rick Westhead of TSN has spearheaded this investigation. He's done a lot of great work around a lot of different issues like this and many other behind-the-scenes things that are difficult topics. Does great work for that side of the business, and now there's more articles in The Athletic by Katie Strange, and Katie's a great writer and digs into a lot of difficult topics too. So I just haven't had enough time to really read through all the articles that are out there about this and really go through this a little bit more. There is former coaches and other former players that have spoken out publicly, that their names are out there, that have been involved in this too. And it's believed, I know one snippet I did catch from The Athletic, is that they claim that everybody on the team knew. And here's the other part of this as well. At that point in time, there was a lot of other current NHL GMs that worked with the Blackhawks, and a lot of people are questioning whether or not they knew anything about this and didn't speak up either. That includes Winnipeg GM Kevin Cheveldayoff and Habs GM Marc Bergevin, who of course were both assistants there before they went on to get their GM roles where they are now. Of course, Joel Quenneville was the head coach, currently in Florida. You wonder what they knew or didn't know. And at this point, I'm not sure any of them can really be any kind of trouble for it. But and there's some wondering, is the current players that are still there from there, like Kane, Taves, etc., like Keith Seabrook, any of those guys going to have, for not speaking out? I don't think they can be any kind of legal trouble. Obviously, they're not the ones that did it. And sometimes when you're the one who didn't say anything or do anything to help, you can kind of be classified as being guilty as well. So it's a really messy, ugly situation. And we'll see what comes from this through the courts. But like I said, I will touch on this probably a little bit further. I just need more time to read through all the material and find out a little bit more details here before we sit down and do a more in-depth conversation about it. But it's an ugly situation that needs to get out there. I'd like to see more pressure on the NHL to investigate, because that's the big part of this right now, is that the NHL doesn't appear to even be looking into this, and this has been out there for a few days now and no response yet. So we'll see. The NHL needs to get on top of this and needs to address this situation pronto. Now, before we jump into anything further, I do want to take a moment and just acknowledge our channel sponsor, Manscaped. Top Shelf Hockey is proud to be sponsored by Manscaped. Of course, with Manscaped, we have a special offer here for all Top Shelf Hockey viewers, where you can get 20% off and free shipping on all orders at manscaped.com. Now, of course, Manscaped just launched a brand new Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer, which is a fantastic product. They've taken the level up here, even again with the skin-safe replaceable blades. It's waterproof, it's wireless charging, has a travel lock on it, as well as a nice light so you don't miss what you're doing. So certainly a terrific product. Now, many people associate Manscaped with their trimmers, which is certainly kind of their top product, but they do have a lot of other great options as well, including what they call the Weed Whacker, which is another trimmer for your ears and nose. And they have a variety of deodorants and sprays as well, which also keep you fresh and are terrific as well. So certainly Manscaped has a lot to offer, and we certainly highly recommend all of their products. So check out manscaped.com and use promo code TSH for 20% off and free shipping. Getting into today's trade rumors, we're focusing mainly on a couple of teams, a lot of Vegas and Minnesota here. And to a degree, we're going to talk about Jack Eichel and how he could be linked to either or both of those teams. But first up, I do want to look at the Golden Knights. I mean, we talked a bit yesterday about will they kind of make an overreaction here and jump into the Jack Eichel market, because clearly Vegas was a cup contender, and when you fall short, it's not fun. It hurts, and you have to think they're sitting back right now going, okay, what do we need to do to get over the hump? Vegas owner Bill Foley is anything but patient. He's only been in the league with the Golden Knights for 4 years, and you know they want a Stanley Cup more than anything. So clearly they're going to analyze things and see how they can make things better. And as I mentioned in the last couple of days here, since everything's kind of gone down, Vegas needs a top center more than anything. So to me, I understand Jack Eichel is going to be a hot commodity. There is some risk to that trade, but he is the ideal kind of player that they absolutely need. But a couple of things more from Vegas here, from their season-ending media availability, that kind of raise an eyebrow, maybe think a little bit further about the situation, that it might be more likely that they're going to try to do something like that. Let's take a look here at some comments from head coach Peter DeBoer, as well as GM Kelly McCrimmon and Marc-Andre Fleury himself. Because, I mean, many feel that Fleury's going to be the main player to be traded to free up the cap space to make an additional big move, to bring in another big ticket item, which would be a guy like Eichel to play that number one center role. So look here first from Jesse Granger on Twitter, of course, who's the athletic beat writer for the Golden Knights. The first comment comes from head coach Peter DeBoer. Peter DeBoer says, the goalie tandem this year was a blessing, but next year is a different year. Now, he also goes on to say that obviously next year won't be a shortened, condensed schedule, which will be a factor as well. But still, he's right. Next year is a different year, and it sounds to me like he does not expect to have that goaltending tandem. So you can probably read that and interpret it in different ways, but that's the first thing that came to my mind, is obviously we know Fleury is a decent chance he gets moved. He almost got moved last offseason. A deal was pretty close to going to the Pittsburgh Penguins, which to me, if he had to move, would probably be his preferred place to go finish up his career anyways, you'd have to think. Go back with his old buddies, Sid and Gino and Letang, and try to make one more run for it before he likely calls her quits. But you never know. Fleury's still playing good. It wouldn't be shocking if he played beyond his contract, to be honest. He might be getting up there in years, but he still looks like a capable goaltender who can contribute to an NHL team. So we'll have to see what his thoughts are on that, but we're still another year from really having to really look at those questions. Now, next up, here's a quick quote from Fleury himself, where Fleury says that he hasn't really thought about the future, but it's always been in his heart to finish up and retire with the Vegas Golden Knights. So based on that comment, it does make you wonder if he thinks he'll retire when the contract's up. I mean, that's difficult to say for certainty, but still, sounds like he wants to stay in Vegas. But as I've mentioned before numerous times, an NHL player is never going to come out and really say they want to leave an NHL team while they're still with said NHL team. That's just not how things go. I mean, that just would be really weird to say, yeah, I know I'm probably going to be traded. I'm probably not going to be back next year. Players don't have those kinds of conversations publicly, so I would not expect any different here from Fleury. And here is another quick quote from GM Kelly McCrimmon, who says that he feels that this year was their absolutely best team. They made some improvements on player personnel as well as style of play, and without those improvements, he wonders if they even would have gotten by rounds 1 and 2 where they defeated teams like Minnesota and Colorado. So certainly some tough tasks there, and I agree with Kelly McCrimmon that this probably was their best team so far, but you know what? I still think they're a piece or two away from going all the way, and it'll be interesting to see how they respond to that. Like I said, they have goaltending. Even if you take away a goalie, they still have a very capable goaltender in Robin Lehner or Marc-Andre Fleury. If one of them's not there, they have a really, really good blue line. Even without Martinez, if they can't keep him in free agency, still a good chance they have a really solid blue line. They have some really good wingers. You're just missing some more strength down the middle. So we'll see what they do. But to me, this sounds like the writing's on the wall that Fleury's likely going to get traded, and they will likely enter the Jack Eichel sweepstakes. And obviously, I do see other people online, great sources that I normally refer to, who have indicated they would not be one bit surprised at all if Vegas does indeed jump into the Eichel sweepstakes. Doesn't mean they're going to be successful, but still, they will make those conversations happen, and they will be in the mix. There's no doubt. They always are in the mix when it comes to big-name players hitting the market when you don't expect them to likely be there. They did it with Pacioretty. They did it with Stone. They did it with Leonard, and they're likely going to do it again when it comes to Jack Eichel. Now, further on to Eichel in the Minnesota Wild, Michael Russo of The Athletic has recently reported that the Sabres and the Wild have definitely held conversations, and you could say that the Wild are in the mix, and at the very least are kicking tires. But he does go over in his article what he feels would likely take for the Wild to get the job done and to make the acquisition here of Jack Eichel, and it's going to be a hefty price. But of course, he also indicates, and we've said this before, that the price is likely going to change here over time. As of right now, it's rumored, and I stress the word rumored, that Kevin Adams, the GM of the Sabres, is looking for as many as 6 pieces in a return for the star center, and we're likely looking at least 4 to 5 of those pieces either being first-round picks or quality players that were former first-round picks. So, obviously it's going to take a lot. So what he feels Minnesota would likely have to give up would likely be one of their top young forwards in Kevin Fiala. We're looking at the top 2 prospects being Marco Rossi and Matt Boldy. Feels the Sabres may push for both, but at the very least, it'd have to include one. Doesn't mean both would end up going in a deal, but one of them for sure. Both of these prospects can play center too, so I don't know really which one Buffalo would have a preference for or how that would work out. Obviously, a first-round pick would likely have to be included. Thankfully for Minnesota, they do have 2 first-round picks this year, so if they trade one, it's not the end of the world. And both picks that they have, which are their own and the Penguins pick, really are not that difference in the picking order. So one or the other is not going to make a huge substantial difference. And the other big piece here likely would have to go would be Matt Dumba. So would the Buffalo Sabres entertain a trade from the Minnesota Wild that would give them Matt Dumba, Kevin Fiala, prospect like Rossi or Boldy, and a first-round pick? And you might have to throw in maybe something else on top of that. Maybe you throw in a B-level prospect. Maybe you throw in a 3rd or 4th-round pick if it's absolutely necessary. But to me, that likely would stand an excellent chance against a lot of the other top teams like the Rangers or the Kings or the Ducks or these other teams that are rumored to be in the mix who have deeper prospect pools that could likely have a better chance, theoretically, at kind of wowing the Sabres into a better offer. Now, like he said, though, a lot of these teams are probably not going to want to pony up that kind of price tag. Right now, Kevin Adams is shooting for the moon because he thinks he can. He has time. He doesn't have to rush into this. And as the offseason goes further along, we get closer to the draft, and they get a little bit more pressure to get a deal done between Jack and his agent and probably ownership too. You have to think that price is going to come down a little bit. They're going to settle on a slightly smaller package and get the deal done, is what my best prediction and estimation there would end up being. So the Wild certainly do stand a good chance. But of course, Dumba's a player that could end up getting moved regardless if it's for Eichel or not. Of course, there's expansion draft implications there, which Russo talks about. He also talks about the fact that they did indeed look for a center last year, and they were trying to trade with Calgary. They talked a lot about Sean Monahan, apparently, and decided that that wasn't really what they wanted to do. I don't think they had some interest in Monahan, but not enough to answer the asking price for the Calgary Flames. So it goes to show the Monahan trade rumors we've talked about a bit. There is definitely something to that, and they've been around since last year, and it's just amped up this year, more likely even to take place. But Matt Dumba is likely going to go in one way or another, and if he doesn't end up going to a team like Buffalo in an Eichel trade, he could end up in Seattle. But I think that's less likely. I think they'll move him so that doesn't happen. And then, of course, he could end up in Philadelphia. The Flyers are another team to watch. When it comes to Dumba, we know they want a top right-shot defenseman. And keep in mind that Chuck Fletcher, the GM of the Flyers, used to work in Minnesota, drafted Dumba, knows more than most people around the NHL exactly what he's capable of. Obviously, he's the one that did that contract with him right now. So certainly, it's a real possibility that they could pivot there. And the Wild could also get additional center help by getting a guy like Nolan Patrick out of the Flyers organization in a Dumba trade. Another guy like Morgan Frost could possibly be considered. But Patrick, we know, wants a change of scenery, and it wouldn't be shocking if a deal like that was pulled off. I mean, the Wild could possibly use more than one center. They have Joel Eriksson made a great leap this year, good progress. When they had Marcus Johansson first acquired, he was expected to be a 1C, but really wasn't. Played mostly on the wing, a little bit of center, but not a lot. We've seen Victor Rask play a lot with like Kaprizov this past year, and really he's not a 1C either. You get Nico Sturm, who could be a bottom 6 guy. You get Bonino and Bukestad, and they're not exactly wowing the offensively either. So they have multiple guys on the roster that can play center, but none of them are really more than, outside of Eriksson, more than a number 3 or 4. So ultimately, I think if they could grab 2 centers this offseason would be even better. It takes the pressure off Eriksson a little bit, but Eriksson, considering how good he is at both ends of the ice, could be a really solid number 2 if they went after a guy like Eichel and a guy like Patrick. Real potential solid depth down the middle for a long time. So let me know your thoughts on all these trade rumors, what we're likely going to see, and we'll talk about it further in the comment section. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news and rumors on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.